I'm super pumped to be talking with everybody today about schedules and runs of shows. Like Carl said, this is one of the most difficult things to be able to put together before your event, and it's perhaps one of the most crucial. With a schedule, you'll be able to share what's going on with your participants, with your sponsors, with everybody involved with your event. And also just your schedule will help you plan your event as a whole from the very beginning when you decide we're going to have this event to the midst of it. You will want your schedule to be awesome. And so this is what this office hour is aimed to do. Like Carl said, I'm Nick Quinlan. I'm a senior partner at Major League Hacking. What that means is I run our business operations and help facilitate our event operations. But before that, and perhaps more importantly to this, I was the commissioner of Major League Hacking North America. And really what that meant is I worked with all of our events to make sure that they were as successful as possible, oftentimes giving them a lot of help with their schedules and all that. And, you know, I got to be honest, giving help with schedules is one of my favorite things to do because for as long as I can remember, schedules have been a core part of my life. I've scheduled pretty much every major event from the time I was 5 onwards. In fact, the reason that I have all these schedules easily available is because I have a Facebook album full of them. So schedules are a big deal to me, and they've always been a big deal to me, but they're especially a big deal when I'm doing things as part of Major League Hacking. Like I said, I run our operations as a whole, and part of that is our event operations. We, as Major League Hacking, book all sorts of things to come to events that we work with. Things like pallets full of hardware and MLH team members to come help out, and this, that, the other thing. And we book these weeks, if not months, in advance. And oftentimes, we need schedules to be able to do that. And more often than not, events will not have those schedules on their website, and we'll end up needing to guess or just call up the event to ask them, like, when are you starting? And honestly, that makes me livid. And that's MLH. But before that, like, I was a sponsor of events. I used to be a developer evangelist at a company called StemGrid, and we sponsored a ton of hackathons, and a lot of those were student hackathons. And during those student hackathons, I'd of course be coming to those, and so I'd need to book a plane ticket or something like that. And all the time, events wouldn't have their schedules on their websites, and so I, as a sponsor, wouldn't know what to do. I would be livid. And you know, even before that, I was a participant in the hackathons. Back when I was in school, I lived kind of far away from all the places that might have a hackathon, and so I'd have to plan on when to get on a public bus and then another public bus and another public bus in order to get to a hackathon. And ideally, I'd like to do that days, if not weeks, out from the event so that I could know if I needed to tell my employer that I was going to take time off or let one of my professors know that I was going to skip their class. And more often than not, hackathons didn't have schedules, so I was livid. It should be your goal as a hackathon organizer to keep everyone happy. Your participants need to know your schedule so that they can know what they're spending their weekend on. Your sponsors need to know your schedule so that they can get the most for their money. And of course, we as MLH need to get your schedule so that we can make sure that you're getting everything that we promise as a member event. So keep people happy. You need a schedule. So we're gonna talk really about schedules and how to make them as successful as possible. We're going to start with like the actual creation of your schedule. How do you actually go about doing that? Where do you start? Where do you go? What are you doing when you're doing that? All that kind of stuff. From there, we're going to talk a little bit about a scheduling tool that takes the schedule another step further, the run of show. Following that, we're going to talk about some key tricks to using your schedule. And finally, we'll close out this with questions, and I'll take a look at some schedules of those on the call to give some feedback. So, without further ado, let's talk about creating your schedule. And where do we start? Well, creating a schedule for an event can be really intimidating because basically you're taking a blank sheet of paper and you're saying, this thing that I've poured months of my life into, this is how it's going to go down exactly. And that's pretty hard to do. So the first thing is just to figure out your start time and your end time. You take both ends, you say, okay, well, we know that the event is going to start at like 5 p.m. on Friday and it's going to end at 5 p.m. on Saturday. 24-hour event, that's what we're expecting. Once you have those two times, everything becomes a lot easier because you can work in and figure out what the other pieces that you need to do during this event are. So when creating a schedule, work from the outside in. So let's take that and let's explore what that really means. So let's say you've got your event and it starts at Friday and it starts at 5 p.m. So let's say your check-in begins and then after an hour maybe your opening ceremony starts and you're just going to start going through each of these pieces. But with each of these pieces there might be sub-pieces, things that you need to consider within, say, the opening ceremony. So once you've decided that your event's going to start at 5 p.m. on Friday, you're going to start putting things on there. Maybe you'll give everybody an hour to check in, which is usually a pretty good amount of time, maybe a little bit more. But let's say you do an hour, then you might have your opening ceremony. Of course, your opening ceremony has parts. Things like 5 minutes to welcome everybody. Maybe you put on an inspirational keynote. You have some time to talk about your sponsors. Then you might have API demos. And, of course, this subschedule is going to have a subschedule because it's not just 15 minutes for API demos. It's 5 minutes for SendGrid and 5 minutes for Twilio and 5 minutes for Microsoft or, whatever. Then you're going to have, a variety of other things, maybe some individual parts of that. But the real key here is that you want to get as deep as possible with your schedule. You want to be thinking about every single minute. Schedule deep. Because if you're not thinking about each and every minute in your schedule, you might forget something. You might forget something big or maybe a lot of really small things, and your schedule's just not going to go as well. So schedule deep. Once you have all this kind of information, then of course you're going to keep going. You're going to say, okay, so my opening ceremony takes me 37 minutes according to this. I might add in some buffer time because, of course, even if we think that SendGrid is going to spend 5 minutes doing an API demo, they might spend 6. Or maybe it takes a little while to do those transitions between API demos and logistics or something like that. You need some buffer time. Always create large buffers because event schedules are hard to maintain, and if you keep yourself with buffer time in that schedule, you will make sure that even if something goes wrong, because you have that buffer, you'll still be on schedule, which is really, really important. So anyways, we have all these things. You start going through it, and you keep going. But now that we've done a little bit on the Friday part, you might want to take a look at the end, because the end is also another really big piece where a lot of stuff's happening. So you'll start scheduling backwards now. You'll say, okay, I have a closing ceremony. How long is that closing ceremony going to take me? And you do the same thing. You schedule deep. So you figure out exactly how long something's going to take. You go through everything, and then from there, you will say, okay, this takes about 90 minutes. As a whole, closing ceremonies will almost across the board take you 90 minutes. But saying that it does take 90 minutes, then the next thing that you'll do is you'll just put it on the schedule and you'll keep working backward and keep working forwards, and eventually a really clear and clean schedule will come together. Now, this is the schedule that you'll put out to your attendees and so on and so forth. But I want to introduce you to something that will help you schedule even better and help you consider those little 5-minute periods, those little 1 minute for this transition or whatever. And that's something called the run of show. The run of show is perhaps the most powerful tool in your arsenal as an event organizer. And I don't say that lightly. The run of show is what allows us to run amazing events. It's what allows people to really, really know what's going on, both the lead organizer, the org team itself, even volunteers who step in. The run of show is great. And in fact, it's nothing more than a schedule. It's a little bit more of an advanced schedule, but it's just a schedule. It talks about things like the date and time that something's going to happen, who is going to be doing it, the task that's going to be happening, and the information that they'll need to do that task. And you need to have a lot of information. You want to have things like single responsible owners, or SROs. That's somebody who owns this task, and they're the only person who owns it and makes sure it's getting done. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't be using your other event organizers or your other volunteers to make sure it happens, but they're the one responsible for it. What that means, though, is that with this run a show, they can take it and they can take that information that's in it and say, hey, I'm busy right now. Carl, can you take a look at this and make sure the midnight stack arrives from Zarene's? It becomes really, really easy to do those kind of things because you have all this information scheduled in the run of show. You want to document everything because by documenting everything, you can make sure that you can step away from your event if something big happens and you need to run off, or if an organizer comes in sick and can't work. Because you have the run of show scheduled, the show can go on. So you want to document everything, including phone numbers for vendors, times, confirmation numbers, everything like that. That your team is doing by the minute. Who is doing what? And this especially means sleep. This is something that every event organizer forgets, and I am making a big deal for it because this is one of those things that can absolutely make or break your event. If you forget to schedule things like this is when this person's going to be sleeping, or this person has to be sleeping now, what's going to end up happening is everybody's going to try and stay up all night long, and then the next morning, no one's going to work well. So schedule your sleep. So that's the run of show. It's a document that talks about every single piece of information that your team is going to be using and doing throughout the event itself. The next thing that I want to talk about is once you've got this run of show, how do you use it? And how do you use your schedule itself? And what are the best tips there? And first thing I want to share about is sharing your schedule liberally. Once you've got this run of show, you can really create a document for every kind of schedule that you're going to need. A schedule for the general public, the people who are coming to your event, your attendees, your hackers. You can also create for yourself a sponsor schedule that you can give to them that has the attendee information as well as additional information for sponsors. And you have a schedule that you can give to volunteers or organizers. Share these schedules liberally with those people. Make sure that they get exactly what they need created from that run of show doc. Just run a filter and share it out. But also share that information correctly. There is a really fine line for what people need to know and what they don't. With hackers, it's really tempting to tell them every single thing that's going on. Things like, oh, dinner's going to be 5 minutes late because the vendor's having a hard time parking. Don't do that. Share what they need to know. Just dinner's happening soon. Share those things correctly with the right people. Now, your food coordinator might need to know that dinner's running 5 minutes late because their vendor can't park the car, but no one else needs to. So share correctly. And accept change. I think this is one of those really, really big pieces about organizing events that's hard to accept, is that your schedule will likely change during the event. While you might be able to put in a lot of buffer time and catch up to some things, there's probably a time when your schedule will change. Maybe a sponsor will switch around their workshop or something like that. Be willing to accept that change in your schedule. People will be fine with that. You just need to make sure that you're giving them the ability to learn about it. So share your schedule in manners that can allow you to change it, things like digital forms. Definitely be willing to do this. Finally, the biggest thing that I can give you as a conclusion to this talk is actually the organizer guide. Just this morning, I added our sample run of show to the organizer guide. So that run of show document that I kind of shared with you as a picture here, that is available in our organizer guide. You can make a copy of that and use that yourself. And it also includes a whole bunch of tips for how long every single piece of your event should be. Things like how long should expo be, all that kind of stuff is all in there for easy reference. Now, we're going to get through actually a whole lot of those things also with the questions. I've seen some of the questions that we'll be talking about, and hopefully we'll answer those particulars in here as well. But if you need a reference sheet, definitely check out guide.mlh.io, which will have all of this information and more in that run of show document. So with that, I'd love to transition into questions and everything else. Awesome. So looking at the schedule, it seems to be a really good schedule here. Now, like I said, typically what I like to do is work in and out from this schedule. So we can see here that sponsor registration starts at 9 a.m. and hacker registration at 10:30. That's giving sponsors about an hour and a half to set up before the hackers start getting there. Well, that's all right. Typically, I like to give sponsors a little bit more time, maybe 30 more minutes or 2 hours to really get their booth set up. You're going to note that most sponsors that you see are actually going to come maybe even just 30 minutes before hackers arrive, but some sponsors are really going to appreciate that. So if at all possible, I would definitely try to get sponsor registration to happen just a little bit earlier, maybe like 8:30 a.m. rather than 9. Going onwards, you have about an hour for hackers to arrive, and then your opening ceremony. An hour is great, although it is absolutely the minimum that I would recommend for hackers arriving, especially kind of early in the morning like that. So maybe bump up your hacker registration a little bit too. Generally, I bet that you were just fine there, but maybe 30 more minutes is also kind of a nice thing for hackers to have, especially if you have hackers coming from a variety of places. GrizzHacks took place at Oakland University in Detroit, and I think they had students coming in from as far as Ann Arbor, which is about a 30-minute drive. But there are some events which, of course, will have students coming in from 6 hours away or something like that. You want to give them time to time their drive. So anyways, going forward, 30-minute opening ceremony, nice and short, that's perfect, followed immediately after by a team formation workshop, which is phenomenal. I do notice lunch is starting kind of late, which I would push up only because there isn't breakfast on this schedule, which means that hackers are going to be eating early, so a 2 p.m. lunch is going to be a little bit hard for hackers to deal with. But then going forward, I noticed that they have 3 different mini events happening throughout the evening, although all early, which is pretty good. One recommendation I have for mini events, though, is that you have your mini event start happening at high attrition times. One of the best things about mini events is it keeps people engaged with the event. It's really easy to say, my code's not working, it's 11 o'clock, I'm leaving. But if there's something exciting going on at 12 o'clock and I'm excited about it and I know about it, I might stay till 12 to work on, to do that. And then I'll work, and maybe I'll work through my bug, and so then I'll stay there. So I recommend pushing your mini events back a little bit, maybe moving the bocce ball tournament to 8:30 and then cup stacking to 11, and then maybe you put code in the dark even at 1 a.m. or something like that, so that really you minimize the number of hackers leaving your venue, because once hackers leave your venue, there's a much lower likelihood that they're going to come back and submit. So definitely there's that. Then let's move over to Sunday. Sunday is a really tricky day typically for events because there is that expo period. So you have a hack submission at 10 a.m. And then expo schedule is announced at 11:30. With 12 p.m. the hacking ends. I'm trying to figure out how particularly the expo happens in here. It looks like the expo might happen at 12 to 1, giving you maybe 60 minutes between hacking ending and the closing ceremony happening. I would definitely expand that. At a minimum, we typically like to recommend 90 minutes for a expo. You can find out more in Shy's office hours on the subject, but I would recommend 90 minutes for that schedule, or for that expo. So you'd want to increase that a little bit. If you have 90 minutes for the expo, then you're going to want to have some transition time. The big transitions that you're going to want to have are a transition to closing ceremony. That will typically take you 30 more minutes to transition into closing ceremony. And you want to have a transition into the expo. You typically will need at least 30 minutes to an hour to clean up your venue to get it expo ready if hackers are hacking in the same space that they'll be doing the expo. So you're going to want to add in another 30 minutes there at the beginning. So from there, it looks like you need 2.5 hours between the end of closing ceremony and the beginning of closing ceremony. Well, yeah, the end of closing ceremony, the beginning of closing ceremony to the beginning of the expo process. Closing ceremony usually will take you something like an hour and a half as well. It's awesome to be able to decrease this time, but typically what ends up happening is you'll take about 5 minutes for each demo. If you have 10 demos, that's going to be 50 minutes. You might add another 10 minutes to get everybody situated, which is an hour already. Then once those top 10 teams have demoed, you're really going to have another 30 minutes for judges to deliberate, which takes, and it does take almost across the board 30 minutes. So during that time, you might have a speaker go up, you might talk about API prizes, you might do a summary of the event, something like that, but you're going to have 30 minutes in there, and then maybe another 10 to 15 to announce the winners. So for that, your closing ceremony is going to have to be like an hour 40, hour 45 minutes. So what this is chalking up to is the event would end around 2:45. If that's an okay time for the event to end, then that's perfect. At 2:45, you would then want to work backwards, right? And go back and say, okay, then we fit in the expo here, go on, so on and so forth. But if, for example, maybe you wanted the event to end at 2 p.m., you're going to have to work everything backwards. And this is why I say that you want to have a set start and end time for your event, because then you can work backwards from there. So if we were to say that the event was going to end at 2, then we'd want to walk back an hour and 45 minutes to 12:15, which is when the closing ceremony might start. Then you'll walk back a little bit more, and you'll say, okay, well, then the expo takes an hour and a half, so that's going to be 10:45 that the expo has to start, and then you can work back a little bit more and say, or sorry, the whole expo process has to start, and keep working back a little bit more each time. So it would look like you had like a 10:15 expo start, or expo cleanup time, and then you do an hour and a half expo, which would bring you to 11:45, and then you have 30 minutes for switch over, and maybe people go get lunch during that time, and then you jump into the closing ceremony. Now again, that's if the fixed start time was 2 p.m., but I hope that helps answer some questions and put into practice some of the things I was talking about. Carl, did you have any other questions?
Yeah, so this question actually comes in from Emily. So, is there a rule of thumb for how long of a break you should have between two different events, i.e. between two talks or between talks and a meal? And following up on that, what is a good time frame between meals at a hackathon?
Okay, so let's answer the first question first. Is there a good period of time between talks or between events? I think it really depends on the type of event that you're doing. Between talks, I typically like to give 15 to 30 minutes of buffer time. That gives time for the previous speaker to run a little bit over, which will happen. It also gives some time to do setup for the other speaker, including finding them at times that can be difficult at an event. So if you have that 15 to 30 minute buffer, you can really, really do that. So that's for workshops, especially in the same room. It also gives hackers enough time to like recombobulate themselves. For mini events, like cup stacking or code in the dark, or any mini event that an event might choose to do, again, it's not so much a timing issue as it is a when to schedule it kind of thing, scheduling it at high attrition times. Now, I would add 15 minutes of buffer between those events too, and 15 minutes is probably a good rule of thumb at any given time to make sure that there is that little degree of buffer between major events happening during the time period. The next question was what, Carl?
What is a good time frame between meals at Hackathon?
Between meals. Okay, so between meals, you're going to want to be feeding people every, gosh, what is it? I think it's 6 hours. I'd have to sketch it out real quick to really tell you that that's the correct number. But something like every 6 hours, you want to have some substantial food for people. So something like lunch then leads into dinner. I'm sorry, it's 7 hours. Lunch at noon might lead into dinner at 7 p.m., which might lead into a midnight snack, which might lead into breakfast at 7 or 8 a.m. Obviously, it's a little bit flexible, but you do want to have some substantial food for people pretty regularly throughout the event so that they can really be full of energy. Of course, you know, with food, there's always a lot to talk about it being healthy and making sure that you're including everybody regardless of dietary restrictions or needs. Jade is going to have an office hours on that topic coming up sometime over the course of the next month, so I'd highly recommend tuning into that, which will have a ton more tips on that, including timing stuff, but definitely 6 to 8 hours between meals. I know I kind of fluctuated there on this because it does fluctuate a little bit. 6 to 8 hours, though, it would be my recommendation.
Cool. So the next question, also from Adam, how many Tech Talks mini games are most appropriate for 24-hour hackathons, and what about for 36?
Okay. Well, first, I want to thank Adam for all these great questions. They really are awesome. So it really depends on your event schedule. The thing about Tech Talks is that they just provide value for hackers. As long as they're happening in a separate room, they don't remove any value from hackers because they're not compelled to go to them. So you could theoretically add in as many Tech Talks as you wanted. Granted, it would be a little bit difficult for hackers to go to all of them and also create a project, but they might want to have that opportunity. The other thing to be considering with Tech Talks is, of course, if you're doing a sponsor Tech Talk, the sponsor wants people to come, and if there's a million Tech Talks going on, people are less likely to come to the sponsor's Tech Talk. As long as you set expectations up front, though, you should be okay with that, with low attendance at any given workshop or Tech Talk. Generally, for Tech Talks, though, you're going to want to have Tech Talks that are important to building like the foundation of a project, something like let's learn Rails or how to code a mobile app in Swift. Those kind of things need to go at the front of your event before the first night for sure. So if you're a Saturday Sunday event, those go early in the day on Saturday. If you're a Friday event, those go late at night on a Friday. Your last day, whether that's a Sunday at a 36-hour event or a Sunday or Saturday on a 24-hour event, that day is pretty much shot for workshops. There's no way that you're going to get any in there very easily. So I'd recommend keeping all the workshops before that. If you have a 36-hour event, of course you can add workshops on Saturday as well. That's your middle day. In that case, those workshops, you'll want them to be less foundational and more additional. So things like, oh, do you want to add text messaging to your app? Maybe you should do it using Twilio or whatever. Here's the time to do that. Something that won't make or break most hacks, but will be useful for them.
Awesome. So that looks like all the questions that we have from the audience. Like Nick said, Jade will actually be doing her office hours next week. They call her the Queen of Snacks and Hacks at HackRU. So I would definitely tune in for that next week and learn all about what you need to know for getting food for all of your hackers. On top of that, coming up, if you enjoyed these talks, we have HackCon in June, so you should join us for that. It's an incredible opportunity to learn all about the organizer community, learn from your fellow organizers, and see the things that they might have succeeded or failed at their events and learn from their successes and mistakes. Really great opportunity to meet a whole bunch of awesome organizers from crazy events all over the nation. You can find tickets for that at hackcon.io. So be sure to pick up your ticket for that. And on top of that, we've actually just opened up a call for speakers so that if you have something really cool that you want to contribute to the organizer community as a whole, highly recommend you sign up to speak, send an application. You can find those at hackcon.io/speak. So thank you very much, Nick. I hope you all had a very learning-filled afternoon. Be sure to tune in next week for Jade's office hours on snacks and hacks. Cool. Thank you, everybody.